I'm gonna take one of these old work boxes. So these are the ones that you can cut a hole, and once it's in, you tighten the screws, and these little wings come out, and it tightens it against the wall. So we know, right, when this is back like this here, we probably don't want this right here because we're gonna mash our plug, right? Same thing on the other side. So I know that that TV has a good 10.5 inches above and below it. So most likely I'm gonna probably go to the bottom side, I think, right about here. So all I typically do for this, right, make sure these screws are back all the way. Kind of figure out where I want this. I'm probably gonna bring it up really close. I'm gonna stick my level on it. I'm gonna get it nice and level. And then all I do is I put this box on backwards like this, right? I don't need to trace out these ears. All I do is I mark in between the ears. And then on both sides. Like this. Do is use my electrician's like keyhole saw. You can even use a utility knife. You can use a multi-tool, one of the oscillating tools, and cut this out. All right, so I have my keyhole saw here. This is what I'm going to use to cut this box out. So all I do is I stick this into the corner here. Work it in a little bit here. Once it's in, all I do is I just cut straight across. Cut super fast. Does leave a little bit of a mess, so we'll vacuum this up after. But now you want to be careful. Once you get a couple sides cut on here, if you push this in with your hand or hit it really hard, you can actually break. Since we cut this much here, sometimes it'll break. So I've done this a bunch of times. Just take your time with it. Now, especially now, if I would just put this on here and just slam it with my hand, I'd probably break this and then our hole would be all messed up. And then we'll have to do some patching. We don't want to do that. So just get it in. Let's bring it across. All right, we got a little bit here, just like that. And then what you do next is take your box, make sure your tabs are in all the way here. And what I do is I just like to dry fit it here. So we need to, we just need to shave it a little bit more. Probably at the top here. All right, and I'm not gonna push this in all the way because if those tabs drop down, like it just did, it's gonna be hard to take out. So all I need to do is just stick a screwdriver in here and turn it a little bit. We'll just turn it up a little bit, and what that does is it brings that little tab. That tab was hanging down like that. It just brings the tab up like that. You don't want to unscrew it a lot because the tab will fall down on the wall and then you're screwed, no pun intended. All right, so our next step is to secure the power to this receptacle before we do anything else, before I even pull this cover plate off. If you're not familiar with electricity or doing electrical work, I advise you to keep away or at least read up on it, learn about it. It's a good thing to know. It's a great trade to learn. I've been doing electrical work for a very long time. So I have my fluke voltmeter here, and as you can see, there's 120 volts. I have my leads inserted here. And what I'm gonna do now is I'm gonna go down to the basement to my breaker panel. I'm gonna locate the breaker for this bedroom, and I'm gonna shut it off. All right, so we're down at our breaker panel here. Let's open this up here. I'm pretty sure it's this bottom one here. It is labeled bedroom. We do have 4 bedrooms in this house, but we recently painted our master and replaced all the receptacles and light switches, and I'm pretty sure this is the one I flipped. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna shut this off, and then we'll go upstairs and we'll check, with our digital voltmeter and make sure we have no power on that receptacle before we proceed. All right, so we're back upstairs, and as you can see, we have 84 millivolts. It's jumping around. So millivolts tells me that this is definitely dead. So what we're gonna do now is we're gonna pull the cover plate off, we're gonna pull the receptacle out, and see what the situation is inside here with our wiring before we proceed. So let's pull this off. As you can see here, this particular house is an older house, so it has metal outlet boxes, hence the black electrical tape. That's just like a standard practice I like to do because the screws on the side here are so close to this metal box here, we don't want them arcing out. So it looks like we only have 2 wires being used on here. We have 2 free terminals, so that's good news. That will allow us to take our wire that we're going to be feeding up to the upper receptacle and just tap right onto here. The only thing we will need to do besides that here is take our ground off. If you look up at the very top inside of this outlet box, you'll see this little strain relief right here, right? So we're gonna loosen up this flathead screw here. We're gonna pull this strain relief out. And then you'll see, once I get this out of the way, there's an additional hole on the right side. And that's the hole that we're gonna use to feed our Romex up for the outlet box that we're mounting above. All right, so now this is out. Now, I'm not sure if the camera can see this or not, but there is an additional little knockout right here. And typically all you have to do is put a screwdriver in it and twist. All right, so I finally was able to break the little tab out of there. This is what it looks like. It has a little slot in there to stick a screwdriver in so you can pry it. These are a lot easier to pry out with the box in your hand and not already mounted inside of a wall, but we got it out. So that leaves, leaves us with an empty hole on the right side in here. Our feed wire comes in on the left. So we're gonna use that right side hole to run our Romex up. All right, so I have a length of Romex rolled out, and it helps to roll it out and get it kind of flat, otherwise it gets all curly in the wall and gets hung up. So all I'm gonna do with this is I'm gonna put just a little swoop on this like this. We're gonna move our receptacle to the side here, and I'm gonna feed it up through the hole. And you wanna do this kind of slow. And if you do it kind of slow, you won't catch on anything up on the wall. And just you can kind of feel as you're pushing this in if it catches on anything. All right, because it'll feel like sometimes I've had where it feels like it's going in, right? But it's just bunching up in a bundle inside of the wall instead of going up to the top. So you want to try to look up at your hole where you expect this to come out here. And once you see it, then you know you're good. And I'll show you what I mean. So you can see that inside of here now. So all we gotta do is, hole's kind of small with my big hands here, is try to get this out, and bam. Pull that off, and then there's a little cardboard liner here on your ground wire. You can just snap that right off. I'm gonna use that little bent tab to feed my wire in. This is all you gotta do. Pull this in here, all right? And then you don't want too much of the Romex sheath inside of the box. I'm gonna press down on that a little bit, and we're gonna put this in here. We're gonna make sure these little tabs are pushed in all the way, also with the screws here. We're gonna get this right to the wall just like that. Grab our Phillips screwdriver. I know don't recommend using an impact on here unless you're really good with an impact. It's easy to strip these out. And then you'll feel when the tab engages on these. You don't want to go too crazy, right? I feel that it got snug. I'll probably give it another half a turn. All right, so we're good. So now our next step is to mount the receptacle to this. All right, now this particular receptacle is an Eaton Brand. I actually picked this up at Lowe's. So this is a surge protection duplex receptacle. Now it's pretty large, as you can see. So the box that you do purchase, if you're doing something similar to this, make sure it is large enough for this to fit inside, because these are pretty large. Now on here you have, it's just like a GFCI, where you have a line and a load side. So the line side, that's the side that you're feeding. Load side would be if I'm feeding an additional receptacle off of this, and that goes the same for like a GFCI type outlet. What I like to do always is connect the ground first. And they have it so you can just strip the wire, slide it under here and tighten it, but I found that it actually loosens up and pops off fairly easy. So what I like to do is on your wire strippers, you notice you have some holes for cutting screws, or there's also 2 holes that don't have any threads in them. I like to use that to bend myself a loop. And you just stick just the end of it in there, and then just turn over like that, and you get yourself a nice loop. Now that loop, when you tighten the screw, you want the end of this loop to tighten on itself as you tighten the screw. So you always want this pointing clockwise as you tighten the screw. So we'll stick that on here. I'm gonna actually take the end of my strippers here, and I'm gonna bend that loop onto itself a little bit so it fits on there really good. And then the wire will sit inside this channel, and then we just tighten this up. All right, and our ground's done. And we only have the other 2. So when stripping these, you don't want to strip too little and you don't want to strip too much on here. So it's typically about 3/4 of an inch that you want to take off. If you strip too much, you'll actually have bare wire hanging out of the back side here. And they actually give you a strip gauge. If you look on the back, it's probably about 1/2 inch. I actually stripped these a little too long. I didn't realize that these were not quite a backstab, right? I don't like backstabbing receptacles because they do fail. But this actually has a little clamp inside that grabs that. So I'm gonna trim these down a little bit, and I'll show you why. If I strip this too far and I put this in here, and when it bottoms out, you'll notice that there's some bare wire still. We don't want that. We want everything to be recessed into there nice and safe. And we're gonna make sure that we're going on our line side, not our load side. So silver screw is always the white wire. That's our neutral. These newer ones actually tell you on there, they say white. Doesn't say neutral, but it does say white. But white always goes to silver screw. Black always goes to the brass or gold colored screw. Most receptacles have these ears on them. So for this to be able to fit on here nice and flush, there's a little recess here. For that to sit on there flush, we have to break these little ears off. So all you do is you take some pliers, and there's actually a little perforation or an indentation there rather, and we're gonna take our wiring. This is a plastic box, so I'm not gonna worry about wrapping any tape around here. I'm gonna try to get that wire sheath down a little bit more because we had bent that tab, that strain relief tab a little bit, so it's letting this wire move up and down the side of the wall a little bit. So these, when you go to push a receptacle in, you don't want any real sharp bends on here, so I try to put like a little loop on it like this. You can almost put like a little S loop. just like this. So then when you press it in, it just, everything fits in here real nice. The wires don't have As you can see, you see how this fits in between this little recess here? That's why I bent those tabs off. If those tabs were still on there, they would be hitting. They'd be hitting the plastic here, and then this would actually bend as you tighten it down. We don't want that. We'll make sure this is really nice and snug in here. We'll grab our cover plate. All right, so we're gonna put our strain relief back in here. So what I like to do is I like to grab the strain relief with a pair of needle nose pliers, and that helps me kind of guide it in here. Oh, there we go, we're good. And what I wanna do is, right, I don't want all of this Romex sheath inside of the box. I want it kind of just sticking out a little bit underneath the strain relief as I tighten it up. So I'm gonna push that back into the wall, and we'll tighten this up. You don't wanna crank on this too hard. You just want it snug. Okay. That looks good. All right, I'll tighten her up a little bit. All right, so now we're done with that. Now we're gonna get our ground wire. Let's move this off to the side here. This red one we can actually tuck back in here because it's not used. And then the ground, I'm just gonna wrap around all the grounds that are there already. All right, and we're gonna cut this off right here. All right, we got that wrapped around in there. Now we want to make sure our connections are extremely tight. It's very important. Loose connections or hot connections, they lead to fires. So very, very, very important part of doing electrical work. So I'm gonna put a little twist on there. That's all tight. I'm gonna put the greeny wire nut back on here. We're gonna tighten this up. All right, that's pretty tight. Now, you can probably see it a little bit better now than previously. So how I make that loop is I use this little hole there, and I just stick the wire in a little bit, just like that. Got a loop. And you wanna make sure that loop tightens onto itself, right, as you tighten that screw. So I like to pinch it against itself. And as we tighten this, the end of that loop is on this side. So as we tighten it, it tightens against itself. It's really important. So for screw terminals, unlike the terminals on that surge protector, these are the ones that we want about 3/4 of an inch. And that allows you to get a nice loop on here and get it onto the screw and not have any bare wire sticking out of the back or not have any insulation under the screw. So we're gonna loosen this up. We're gonna twist this around. I'm gonna put it over the screw, just like that. And then we take our wire strippers or needle nose, whatever you have handy, and try to bend that loop onto itself, just like that. We'll tighten this up. Make sure that loop is going the right direction on your screw terminal. Make sure you're tight. We'll do the same thing with our neutral. Bring that over the top here. Strip off about 3/4 or so. And you'll know if it's not long enough because you'll have insulation under the screw. You don't want that. So you can actually, even with it like this, if you need to take a little bit more off, you can actually go back on here like that, and you'll see you can actually take a little bit more off and just pop it off the loop if you need to. No sense remaking the entire connection or cutting it, especially if your wires are too short. I'm gonna get some electrical tape to wrap around this since this is a metal box. And all I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna put one wrap on here. Don't need to go totally crazy. As long as your connections are tight, you shouldn't have an issue. Oh, and I noticed we actually lost the screw up top here. So we're gonna put that back. This is why it's important to have this fiber washer intact. That's exactly what happens if you lose it, the screw falls out. We're gonna get one screw started here and make sure to give it a couple good turns so it doesn't pop out. And then we'll get our bottom screw lined up. And you will notice sometimes that when you change a receptacle or pull one out and put it back in and you've messed with the wires a little bit and it doesn't stuff back in correctly, sometimes the face of this will actually be angled, and you'll notice it when you go to put your cover plate back on. It's not too bad here, but it actually is sunk down more on that side than this side. All you have to do is just kind of take it and bend it a little bit and then tighten it in, and then you're good to go. Tight now. We're gonna put our cover plate back on, and then we're gonna turn our power back on, make sure everything tests out good. All right, let's go back to the breaker panel. All right, back at our breaker panel. All right, so I'm not sure if you can see the green lights or not with the light here. Let's shut it off. There you go. So you can see both of these green lights, right? So the bottom light is for the bottom plug here. Top light's for the top plug. So that is your surge status. So if the surge protection failed for either one of these, that corresponding light would be off. So we're gonna stick our meter in here. All right, so we have our meter leads in here. Well, to get the glare off of our lens here. As you can see, we got 120 volts, so we're good. Now our next step is, now that this is mounted, is to take the mounting bracket for the TV itself that mounts onto this arm, mount that on the back of the TV, hang that on here, make sure our angles are all good and everything's level, and test her out.